Thank you so very much. My name is Karen Tucker, and I am Chief Executive Officer and a board member at the Churchill Club. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. The name of our program is the Changing Marketing Mandate, and the aim of the discussion is to explore challenges and opportunities for the future marketing organization. With us to weigh in are Liza Landsman, Chief Customer Officer at Jet.com, Whitney Mortimer, Chief Marketing Officer at IDEO, and Karen Walker, Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at Cisco. And here to lead them in conversation is Jake Sorofman, who is Chief of Research at Gartner for Marketers. This gathering represents a special opportunity not just to hear from our distinguished speakers tonight and the insights that they have to impart, but also to connect with others in the room in a meaningful way. There are senior, motivated people in this room from around the world, and I believe that we share a common bond and common interest in innovation, in economic growth, and in social good. So we wish to encourage you after the program to say hello to somebody that you don't know, somebody new, and perhaps even exchange views on what you heard on stage. Special welcome to Hans Ballmakers and our guests from the Entrepreneurship Conference. And we'd also like to thank Yvonne Genovese, Don Bulmer, and Jake Sorofman for their invaluable assistance in creating this program. And then finally, a very big welcome and thanks to Epsilon for their sponsorship. Thank you so much, all of you. If you are tweeting, please do use the hashtag Churchill Club, and you will find other Twitter information in your bulletins. So let's now give a very warm welcome to our speakers and moderator. And welcome to the stage.
Hi, everyone. How you all doing?
Woohoo.
Good dinner? Excellent. I'm really excited to be here. So as Karen mentioned, my name is Jake Sorofman. I'm with Gartner. And I focus on the office of the CMO as a buying center and really the practice of marketing. And one of the things that we've seen in the market today is that marketing is changing really rapidly. So we used to think of marketing as sort of a promotional channel. You might think of it as the bullhorn for the brand. And it's really becoming the growth engine for the business in many cases. And with that, we see CMOs taking on a much broader mandate. We see CMOs that are, in many cases, responsible for the broad-based customer experience. We see a lot of CMOs that are responsible for a digital commerce strategy. In many cases, we see CMOs who own or share P&L responsibility. We see CMOs who are either driving or substantially contributing to innovation, product innovation, experience innovation, business model innovation. So there's a whole lot being laid at the marketing leader's feet. And we're going to talk about that today and what it means for both these CMOs and what it means for you as either CMOs yourselves or aspiring CMOs or marketing practitioners. Before we jump into the conversation, I want to spend just a couple minutes, if you'll indulge me, on what we see as the six habits of progressive CMOs. And this comes from some research that Gartner's published, which is really a framework for thinking about, what are the progressive habits of marketing leaders today. We've gone out in the wild and we have conversations with CMOs every day. What are the things that are getting reflected back at us? So pattern number one is thinking like a CEO. So these CMOs understand the mechanics and economics of the business, and they align and prioritize all of their activity around those mechanics and economics. And they execute with a commercial mindset, and they measure for causal precision. So they're really thinking about business outcomes and business impact. The second habit is really mastering customer economics. They know the difference between loyal customers and what we describe as loyal customers. So these are loyal customers that are actually also profitable to the business, and they're able to segment and segregate high-value customers from the rest and invest disproportionately to deepen relationships with those customers and then go out and find more of the same. The third habit is thinking omni-channel but acting multi-channel. A little philosophical, but what does omni mean? Omni means every and always. And every and always kind of means boiling the ocean. So these CMOs identify the right channels, the right mix of channels that are high value to the customer and importantly sustainable for the business. The fourth habit is actively delivering on the brand promise. So these are CMOs who are looking beyond simply promising ahead of what the product or experience delivers, and actually actively influencing how that experience is made manifest for their customers. Because they recognize that if they're not delivering an exceptional customer experience, they're marketing against a headwind. The fifth habit is thinking right data, not big data. So for all we talk about big data today, most companies still have small data problems. They're still trying to get their first-party data in order. So they start with a view of the questions they need to ask and answer, rather, and the problems that they need to solve, and they use that to really home in on the right data. And then finally, they're really not talking about digital at all. Why? Because digital is the starting assumption for everything they do. They're not treating it as this specialized thing hanging off to the side. And of course, that's an aspiration. So for traditional companies that weren't born digital, they have to talk about digital. But let me put it to the panel, and let's start with maybe Liza, because among us, with the exception of me, you have a different title. So you're Chief Customer Officer at Jet.com. Is that more of a CMO role with a broader remit, or is it something else entirely?
Well, I actually think the definition of CMO is so expansive right now. I don't know that I would say, like, is it like a CMO? Because that's something different almost every place. For us, it's really, and I chose that title very purposefully because it both has the connotation of being kind of a consumer advocate at the executive table, which I thought was really important in a business that is so supply chain driven, because the temptation to sort of push operational challenges into the consumer experience is great when you're supply chain driven, and you have to really guard against that. But also because I want to key on, I forget if it was the fourth or fifth habit, but one of the things that we say all the time, and my team makes fun of me because I have like 6 expressions that I use all the time.
Me too.
But one of them is, the only rule we have in marketing is that everything we say has to be true, which doesn't seem like it would be such a big leap, right? But having worked in many places where marketing and branding was, I will say this kindly, foreshadowing things that hopefully one day would become true.
Truthiness.
Truthiness, right. We're truthy before that was. Is that not only do you have kind of, some level of moral obligation to only say things that are true, but if you have none of those moral compunctions, it's just really inefficient. Like, it violates your investment thesis to say stuff that's not true in a world where the distance between the assertion and the experience is about a click.
Bingo.
So that makes it hard to be effective if the thing on the other side of the click is completely different than the expectation you've set. Which is why in the remit of the Chief Customer Officer, I have marketing and PR and communication, so some of those more traditional, I guess, marketing functions, but all of the customer experience, including the product and consumer analytics and research and prototyping. So it's kind of the whole gestalt of the stuff that touches the customer.
Makes sense. That was habit number 4, by the way. Karen, I'm going to put you on the spot very quickly. I know that customer experience is also important for you, and you're driving fairly massive change within a large and traditional company. Liza made the very good point that sometimes you're actually forcing what I describe as the internal madness of how your business works and your customer. When you're reorienting outside in, how do you prevent inside out from creeping in?
Oh, that is so super hard. And one of my expressions in my team is, guys, it's not all about us.
Right.
Right? Because we love to talk about us, especially in high tech, right? We actually let the intelligence get in the way of the work, and the more complicated we make something sound, we think that a customer will pay more for it for some reason. And so it's been a real journey for us. But I would say a little bit differently to Liza, because we actually had a discussion about this as an executive leadership team, as whether or not we should have a chief customer officer. And we decided on a different track. We felt that everyone was the chief customer officer. It was a multifunctional, company-wide sport that everyone had to play, but that marketing could play that role of the steward. And that given so much now of the customer experience is digital and online, then marketing had a very special role to play, because that was something that we could completely influence and drive, was that digital customer experience and that buying journey. So we set it up a little bit differently in terms of being very clear about what was the experience we wanted to create. I remember back in November, I had to give a presentation to our board of directors talking about we need to be thinking about net promoter scores, customer lifetime value, and they looked at me and said, like, we're not a consumer company. What on earth are you talking about? And so it was a big shift, because as Cisco's business model is changing to be much more of a cloud services, software, recurring revenue, you actually are creating that experience for the end user, not for a title or a company. You're actually, I know there's a lot of hype in the market right now about human to human or B2Me, but that's been a big shift for us to actually talk about the individuals and the human side of things inside, especially for a high-tech company full of engineers.
Yes.
Right? And you're saying, I'm going to actually engage with this person at a very human level and build that emotional connection and that experience. We're still on that journey. Let me put it that way.
Got it. Got it. Whitney, I want to bring you into the conversation. IDEO is all about humans. So
what else is there?
what are your thoughts on the
Not
role
for
of,
long, though, by the way.
I'm sorry?
Humans.
Yes.
Coming to the end of that.
So can you talk about the role of innovation in customer experience? And is that a driver of a lot of the projects that IDEO is engaged in? Or?
Absolutely. And I think that we've made our brand around putting people at the center of the three-part equation that was, you can come at your problems from a technologically driven point of view, you can come at them from a business angle, or you can come at them from a human angle. And that's where we really lacked, at least when I was working in marketing in other organizations, that's where we really lacked the kind of the tools that we needed in order to put people at the center of whatever it is we were trying to do. And then what we learned what I learned on my journey of 20 years with this firm is that when you start to put people at the middle of an experience, or all the stakeholders at the middle of an experience, everything has to put people at the middle of the experience. So you'll find that you conceive of new offerings and new ways to go to market and serve the world that are human-centered, but then you find that your communications around what that offer is are suddenly out of whack because they're not linking up to the reality or the insights that you had that propelled that desire to sort of serve folks in a new way. So integrating all of those activities is really, I think, what organizations have been working really hard on in order to grow in the last, say, 20, 25 years, when they kind of ran out of other options other than mergers and acquisition, line extensions, and all these things that basically created business value, but they didn't create new value for people.
So I talk to a lot of clients who are trying to, affect this flip outside in to really understand the customer. But what they end up doing is they end up perpetuating like mythologies. They end up reflecting off of internal biases and anecdotal experiences. If you were speaking just to any marketer who's trying to become customer-centered, what would you recommend they do first, and how would they think about gathering those insights to build that view of the customer?
Well, in how many minutes do I get to explain that? That is a big question. I think there are a lot of paths into that. And so let me just step back and say, I think of my own self as a chief marketer, and there are so many types, as we've said before, but I think of myself as a chief sense maker. And I think of myself as a sense maker first and foremost for the organization. And so, you really are serving an internal audience to try to help them understand what is it that we're trying to live up to in terms of our promise, and what is it that we can do, continually better. And then, of course, you're wanting to make sure that that lines up with what you're trying to do on the outside. But that turns out to be the whole story right now, because going back to what, I think one of you mentioned earlier, which is particularly with this new generation of consumers, they see that gap a mile away. You have to stand for something, and you have to deliver something, and hopefully those two things line up really nicely. So to me, CMO is really about being kind of a sense maker in chief for both the inside and the outside, to sort of be the general manager that has a lot of empathy for all of the different sectors of the business and what they need in order to line up with what it is you want to promise the world.
Does this typically mean, as a CMO, that you're leading by influence rather than formal authority?
I think that's all there is anymore.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, good luck with the top-down thing these days. It really, and in my world, it's been, at IDEO, it's been completely bottom-up. And I had to completely unlearn a more hierarchical way to be. I mean, I would just put things through channels in my old, large, multi-billion-dollar companies, and I got to very small IDEO where it should be easier because it's a smaller organization. Opposite, because what you're doing is you're listening all the time for what's coming up and what's good and where you want to put the energy and the attention and the resources, as opposed to presume that you know and then push that down on the organization. And it's a hard balance because you do need intention, but you also don't want to squash what is good that's coming up and out of the organization.
I think that's such an important point. I mean, this is something we've thought about a lot in sort of creating things like, how do we create our product roadmap? How do we which is you kind of create intention from the top, but then you're just really the distiller of like, do all these things bubbling up, like how do they ladder up to that? And rather than being like, I will fill in all the boxes for you.
Totally.
I will say this is a very tactical thing, but it's very like fresh to me. Having just gone through this recently at Jet, which was recently acquired by Walmart, for those of you who are not my mom and not following this closely. But I did something similar at BlackRock, which is if you're really trying to get at like sort of a customer view, I am a big fan of good old-fashioned customer journey mapping. And my parade example of this, when I worked at BlackRock, which is the world's largest asset manager, they had no idea like how their institutional investors interacted with their funds, any of the materials they wrote, and there was sort of a working thesis, and we called it mythology, that basically institutional investors valued white papers by the pound. Like the bigger they were.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, if you looked at them, you could not come up with any other thesis because they're all like 150-page PDF white papers. And so when I originally proposed, I'm like, okay, well, let's just see what they actually do. People were horrified. They were like, well, you can't talk to institutional investors. I'm like, someone must talk to them. And the big finding from this was, I'm glad you're all sitting down, institutional investors are humans too.
They are humans too.
They don't like to read big ones.
They don't like to read those. They also have clients, and they ended up spending all this time distilling the white papers down to something readable by humans. And it led us to an entirely different approach to marketing to institutional investors. But it was a massive uphill climb just to get many of my colleagues there to admit that they were humans who could be spoken to,
right,
and whose needs could be heard that way.
But didn't your people, I mean, this is the challenge I have
Yes.
as well with engineers, is that they just love to write those white papers, right? Because they want to tell everything they possibly can about the speeds and the feeds and the widgets and stuff. And so it's an addiction. It's something that is really quite hard to break.
Insidious.
It is, and it's that's why I said the intelligence.
That's why God
gets in
made
the way.
Medium. That's a great outlet.
Yeah, that's what you need to do.
Yes.
But I think for B2B companies, I think this is something that we can really learn from the consumer world. So at Cisco, we do a pretty good job, I think, of understanding the customer at an account level, at a company level, right? We know their size of wallet, our share of wallet, what they've bought, the traditional CRM type of information. We also know their propensity to buy. We can say a company of this profile has bought these things, therefore a company of this profile is like. So we have some really good insight that we share with our sales teams about who to go after and who to target. the next level for us, in which we've just started, is layering on that human, individual person information. So I don't know about you, I always get really ticked off when I get an email that says, "Dear valued customer." I'm going, you don't even know my freaking name, right? And it drives you crazy because you think, you know nothing about me. So we've just invested, a lot of this is technology, because we can't scale through humans, is that we're really trying to understand the behavior of that individual, who they are, their name, their demographic, what their personal interests are. So one interesting tidbit for us is that we found out that our security buyers, people who buy our security portfolio, really like Halloween. You think, okay. But if you think about it, it makes perfect sense, right? Because they live in this good, evil world.
It's their world.
Right? And it makes perfect sense. But what we were finding when we were looking at these buyers, they were going off online and they were doing all this stuff around Halloween. Now, if I could use that information about that, which has got nothing to do with what people would normally think about how to engage with that customer, but you're engaging on them in a much more of a human way.
Try finding that insight in behavioral analytics.
That's exactly right.
Exactly. So this is something that's new for us, and so we're doing stuff that customer journeys, personas, stuff that you would do in a very traditional or a typical consumer company.
Right.
We're now doing that in a B2B level, and that's something that is a massive learning curve and change for us. So we want to learn as much as
Can I share a personal epiphany I had around that? In my previous employer, which was a funny little company called Supercuts, I thought I knew everything I could know about my customers, everything. Because we did all that study, and I had a very sort of flattened view of how our customers operated. And what happened was I met a little company called IDEO, which is how I got to IDEO, and they helped me understand that they actually held up a little Polaroid, and I thought, geez, you know, I'm paying you a lot of money, and you're showing me a Polaroid. and my colleague, Jane Fulton-Surrey, who's still there today, the mother of human factors at IDEO, pointed to this and said, you see what's happening here to this guy. And this is this guy, he's been draped with the Supercuts, you know, sort of drape, and he's miserable, and he's been sprayed down, and water's going down his face, and the lighting's terrible. She says, you put that drape on him, and you cut his arms off, and that takes away his power. And basically what you're doing is you're emasculating your customers.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And she was right. And I never could have gotten to that. With all of the research that we were doing, we never could have gotten to that.
You don't think a guy in a chair with a drape would have said, I feel emasculated?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, no, but what he was going to say is, I'm going to delay my haircut by 3 or 4 weeks, and we're going to lose 40% of revenue off that guy because he doesn't want to come back because it's such a terrible experience.
The truth often lies in the dissonance between what's reported and what's observed. It's right in there.
Yeah.
That's it.
And
But you have to know, some of the research we do is very much in service of evaluating or predicting markets.
Yep.
And that kind of research was not designed to do that, although it did. That was designed to basically imagine new directions. And in that case, we said, we got to get rid of the Cape. We got to get rid of the water, which is another kind of regulatory problem. That's another story. But really, you have to know sort of in service of what is your research. In this case, it was designed to propel new opportunities to serve customers very differently, starting with the technology.
Yeah. So I want to switch gears a little bit here. Liza, your company is unique in the sense that you were born digital. So that actually gives you a great opportunity to drive innovation very rapidly.
We're born in the cloud. It's way cool.
Absolutely. Karen, you don't have that luxury.
No.
So how do you take change of that magnitude and scale and make it tractable? What do you focus on first?
Oh, gosh. So
why don't you ask her a hard question?
I know. So another one, you're going to get all my favorite phrases tonight. The other one is that I think that marketing is in the B2B world, so forgive me, but we are probably one of the last functions to be industrialized, but we're probably one of the first to be digitized. Mm-hmm. And so in our case, we've really started with what do we need to do to completely digitize ourselves. So what we're actually going through, the work that the exciting thing, and it's also terrifying, is that our CEO has asked myself and the head of sales to figure out what is a new way for us to digitally go to market. And so it's a little bit about how you think as a CEO, because Cisco has a very, very large, complex portfolio at one end, which is very customized, high-end, high enterprise service provider portfolio, to a WebEx, which we can just, an experience you can just buy with a credit card. That is completely digital, by the way, right? So we do have parts of our portfolio where you can actually manage that whole experience as a digital sales and marketing together. So we're actually going through what is it that we need to do from a digital standpoint to support the different parts of the portfolio, the different customer segments, because we may have a customer of one, like we would have with WebEx, to a very large, complex sale, which is primarily led by our direct sales force. So how we've started to think about the omni-channel question is, and by the way, 92% of Cisco's business is done through channel partners, so we have an extra complexity. We have another dimension because quite often we can't manage the customer experience because a lot of that engagement is done through our channel partners versus us directly. So we have all these different knobs and dials. So we're in the middle of really working through that. Where is digital marketing supporting the business, i.e. supporting sales, because we have high complex deals with a very big customer and we're dealing at a human level and direct, versus where are we going completely digital and what is the role of marketing and sales in between. I do think for even B2B companies, and I think it will take some time, but maybe 3 to 5 years from now, I don't think there'll be such a thing as sales and marketing. I think it will be completely intertwined and it will be more around what's digital and what's human. And that's going to be the boundaries. And we're starting with some experiments in terms of, when does a customer want a human connection versus is a digital connection actually what they prefer,
right,
especially as more millennials enter the workspace and they become our customers, versus when they want that human touch. So those are the boundaries that we're testing and we're learning from.
Makes total sense. Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about innovation. So according to our research, marketers spend about 10% of the overall marketing expense budget on test and learn, sort of experimentation. And about 71% of companies have an innovation budget. But most companies don't have or don't feel that they have innovation in their DNA. They haven't made sort of creativity a culture and a process. So they go to firms like IDEO. We talk about this idea of building innovation pipelines as if, ideas, you can create this inexhaustible wellspring of ideas, but that's really hard to do. How would you advise companies to think about building that sort of culture and making innovation, and I'm talking to Whitney first, part of their organization?
You have this tendency to ask these massive questions, but they're rich, so we can start wherever we want in them. That's a hard question.
Any way you'd like.
I'll need the rest of the evening to talk about that.
A nice glass of wine.
A nice glass of wine would be nice. So when we were talking about this yesterday, a little bit about this, I did mention the fact that you have to come at it from every single level. First of all, there is a cultural part of it, which has to do with making the organization a safe place for ideas, for new ideas. So once you've got that in place, check. You're going to have to do some other things, which is to basically know which of those ideas you want to pour on the sunlight and the fertilizer, and which ideas you're going to want to pull up by the roots because they're tapping out your organization. So that starts to look like a pipeline, right? And then what you've got to do in order to be able to know how to make those choices is you've got to have leadership that is sensitive to both, sort of evidence for why they should continue on with an experiment, or evidence for why they should stop it. And I think that's really hard. And we come from an analytic world. Those of us who went to business school often got the, sort of the qualitative beat out of us. And so we want to be, biased toward the quantitative decision-making tools that allow us to understand things. But young ideas don't work like that. So we've spent a lot of time at IDEO helping leaders and organizations start to be sensitive with ideas at different stages of their journey. As they go to life. And then, of course, that is a culture of prototyping and experimentation and building evidence in order to know what to scale. And I do appreciate what Jeff Moore talks about, which is the 3 horizons, and really understanding sort of knowing what horizon you're in is really important, because if you confuse your horizon 3, what he calls corporate infotainment ideas that are your future, with your horizon 2, which are the things that you're really serious about scaling, if you don't know how to move sensitively between sort of those areas, then you're going going to overinvest in the wrong things, or you're going to underinvest in some things.
Right, makes sense. So I remember a time when marketing was a happy home for English majors, for people that were maybe less mathematically inclined.
French major,
maybe.
Russian major, yeah.
What do you see? I'd love to get all your views on this. What do you see? What are the essential
in English.
skills of a marketer today? And I know that the skills of a marketer are fairly diverse, but what is the must-have skill? If I'm a marketer today and I need to be competitive and successful, what is it that I need to bring to the table? Do you want to go first?
I'd love to, actually. And I'm looking at Christine here, my friend, and that we had this discussion at dinner, I think, with some of our fellow CMOs. And there actually seems to be quite an interesting trait. At our table, a lot of our CMOs had some sort of hard science background. And this is primarily high tech, so maybe not such a big surprise, but engineering, math, and a hard science background. But each single one of them had an amazing creative outlet. They had something that was really that balanced the left brain, right brain. I mean,
like a hobby or a project.
Yeah, like Christine's a poet. I love design. So everyone had something that would ignite that creativity. So I do think it's a cliche, right? But I do think that it is a balance of math and art and science. And so it needs to be an equal measure. I think within my organization, what we're trying to re-inject back in is a very, very high level of creativity and storytelling. I think in a lot of B2B companies, we've outsourced this to our agency partners. And so we're really working at bringing that creative services back inside and to really kind of retool. So we're looking for, I think one of the conversations that we had with Gary was, Gary Briggs was, I'm thinking about hiring storytellers who may be scriptwriters for a stand-up comedian. And I thought about that. That's a brilliant idea.
It isn't even.
Right, because you think about in the digital world, you've got, 8 or 9 seconds now to keep the human.
It's about
lucky.
connections.
Right, and it's like if you're lucky, so it's, we have a shorter attention span than a goldfish. Mm-hmm. And so it's, how do I keep that one-liner going? And so it's a different type of storytelling. It's like you were saying, Liza, it's not the binge reading of a white paper, it's keeping that attention,
right?
And that's a really special skill. We're also thinking about bringing in folks. We've created new roles for us in country that are really publishers, editors, reporters. So hiring people with more of a journalism background, mm-hmm. And looking at our digital properties in country in terms of real-time content curation and engagement. So it's a very, very different skill set than what we've typically hired.
Got it. Perfect. Liza, what's the must-have skill or skills?
I don't know if there's anything you have missed in your list.
Okay.
I guess what I'd say though is, you touched on something, or underlying some of your comments, which I really agree with, which is, there's a little bit of like horses for courses in this, right? The skill set and qualities you want in someone who is like your primary media buyer is not the same mm-hmm. as the primary skill set and qualities you want in someone who is a content creator.
Right.
And both of those things sit squarely in the marketing remit, and I think I wouldn't interview those people the same way. I would probably give one of them a math test, and one of them, maybe I'd give a math test if they wanted to, mm-hmm. but it's not inherently the same set of inputs and outputs. If I were going to make a unifying statement, I would say, I want people who don't take what we do that seriously.
What do you mean by that?
It kind of goes back to the, people get obsessed about like what's on our own Facebook page, when everyone knows the Facebook page you care about most is your own, and secondarily your high school girlfriend or boyfriend that you're stalking, right? Which I am not doing in case anyone is tweeting. Matthew is my husband, I love him. But it's that sometimes people get this sense of like everything out of our mouths is a bon mot, right? That experimentation is scary because like things live forever. And I'm like, It's not. It's not. No one but us is reading all of our stuff.
It's a little self-important, isn't it?
It's right, and that's what I mean when I say, like, so you have to actually, approach this with, rigor and dedication and love and passion, but a real sense of humor about the fact
And humility.
that like this is not, even though some of the math is rocket science-y, like it's not actual rocket science.
Whitney, what do you think?
Well, I'm tempted to say humanism. You gotta just really like people because it's a team sport and you're gonna need a lot of folks to help you get the, train down the tracks. So that's one thing. But there's another part of me that's kind of thinking there is, I really was interested in what you talked about where, the CEO, the CMO mentality is very much like the CEO. It is, but it's not. Because if you were, you'd be the CEO, right? So I personally like connecting the vision and bringing it to life. So it's a bit of a director-producer. I like that. I like sitting right there and saying, where do you want to go and how can I help you get there? And, not just to the CEO, but to, the whole team. I just like, unlocking what's there to, help make it happen. So.
Got it. So let's talk a little bit about marketing technology. So we made a prediction a while ago that by 2017, the CMO is going to spend more on technology than the CIO. And it's actually coming true based on our latest research. My first question is, does that surprise you? And then my second question is, how are you thinking about your technology estate within your marketing organization? Is it a close collaboration with IT? Do you have your own chief marketing technologist? How are you thinking about that? Do you want to go first, Karen?
Sure. We have heavily invested in marketing technology over the last 2 years. And actually above and beyond what we pay to our IT department in terms of the corporate allocation or taxes, we've probably added another $15 to $17 million each year. And it's back to that industrialization towards digitization. I think we were so starved of the technology that we needed, everything from the analytics to automation. We just didn't have it. And so we knew that we weren't able to scale just by using our employees and our teams to be able to do it. It is a close collaboration with IT. I wish we were going faster. It's a little frustrating, I will say. I think, I don't know if there's anyone out there who's doing this brilliantly. Please come and talk to me afterwards, because at the moment we have everything, right? We have Adobe, we have, I hope I don't offend anybody, but we have Adobe, we have Oracle, we have Eloquent, we have all of the things that you would normally expect. And we're trying to really figure out how to bootstrap them all together. And so I just wish it was a little bit easier and we could move a little bit faster. So it doesn't surprise me at all. In fact, actually what typically happens is when we go to conferences and we go to sales events and we talk about what we're doing, the sales guy wants us to go out and talk to the CMO of another company to explain how we're investing in technology and what do we need. So it's a major focus for us. What we've put as our technologist is a double hat with our chief of digital. So.
And what are the reporting lines? Does the chief of digital report to you?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it.
That's how it works.
Dotted line to the CIO or CTO?
No, it's solid line to me. And we have someone in the IT department who is our representation for marketing. That's our key partner. But we are actually driving all of our requirements, what we need, what's the experience that we're trying to create, what is that digital footprint and that customer experience we're trying to drive. We're actually working very closely with sales on it, though, that we're building out our roadmap together.
Excellent. Liza.
So we treat marketing structurally as if it were any other part of the business in this respect. So we have dedicated product team, dedicated set of devs that work in a squad formation with our sort of senior marketing folks. And the marketing team decides what they need, what the uses are, and then work in partnership with those teams around what we build versus what we integrate versus what we buy. And it's worked really well for us. I will say, and it's been nice because we sort of started with a complete clean slate about 14 months ago. So it is kind of your
you're
dream
lucky,
scenario where you're like, what have I used that actually works together? But I do think one of the biggest challenges facing marketers today is exactly what you referenced, which is that I often have this mental model, which is that we are this just big surge protector plugging in like 14 different kinds of technology, and that like a huge part, I mean, I haven't actually done the analysis of how much time we spend integrating third-party market, because I think if I saw the number, I'd be horrified.
Yeah.
But it is not a small number. And I think even within, there's been such a consolidation in marketing tech and ad tech, but so much of it, in my view, and is just a veneer.
Yeah.
Right? It's a roll-up from an acquisition perspective, but it actually hasn't brought those platforms together.
Yeah.
And whoever actually cracks that code,
It's going to be huge, isn't it?
it's going to be huge, because every marketer on the planet will go buy it.
Yeah.
Since we're all so chatty.
Yeah. Very well.
I want to ask one more kind of challenging philosophical question that I promise I'll end before we get
start
to
with you.
Q&A with something a little snappier. But when you think about, we like to say that multi-channel marketing is content hungry, and feeding the beast it takes a village. You need to have lots of people contributing, both inside and outside the organization. The sacrifice could be a level of brand governance, control. How do you reconcile those two things when marketing becomes so distributed? In a sense, everyone's a marketer, everyone's contributing. How do you corral that? Do you want to start?
Why do you always start with me? I chose the wrong speaker. So actually, this is a big topic of discussion with my team today in terms of content transformation and what we're doing. So a little bit like those white papers and those long form factors, we're really we have withdrawal symptoms from keep doing that. But also what we've done is that we have gone to a global decentralized model. So instead of all the content creators sitting in corporate and headquarters, we've actually pushed them out into the markets and pushed them out into the countries. So they're still part of a global team. So somebody who's creating content in Germany around our security portfolio, they could be creating that content on behalf of every country. So what we've started to talk about, and we're not there yet, is that there's some things that we say there's hard rules, there's soft rules, and there's no rules. And so we were talking about this today. The hard rules are, okay, you can't mess with my logo. I'm talking to the German country manager now. You can't mess with the logo. You can't mess with the brand palette and the colors or whatever. There's some hard rules that you can't do. There's other that are soft rules. So for example, if I'm creating content around our data center strategy, you can take that content and you can decide to use it in a different way that's more relevant in your local market. You can tell a local customer story that's relevant for you. And then there's where we said there's no rules. You can do whatever you want, and this is the parameter in which you can do that. And that allows them to really, really move fast and try different things that's good for their local market. But with that comes responsibility.
Right.
Right, because I can't using the F-bomb. There's things that are just within that brand governance that you just can't do, and that's what we're saying. Those are the hard rules that are the non-negotiables. So we're trying to kind of set that up front, so there's not a
flexibility within a framework.
Yeah, there's not the governance, and they have to come back and check everything that they're doing. Does it work? Is this allowed or not allowed? It allows them to move a lot more quickly.
Makes sense. Whitney, what do you think?
Well, I was just going to say that's exactly it. Give them what they need to move more quickly, and they'll take it and run down the path with it. Because nobody wants to be a logo cop. That is just a terrible, job.
Yeah.
So what you have to actually get ahead of them with something better. Now, this is very difficult in a firm full of designers. So, very, very difficult. So, you asked that question, I was like, oh, you're feeling my pain. I often wonder whether that impulse to want to control and lock it down has to do with the fact that I'm a certain age and come from a certain background, or if it's just a natural desire to, the way I think of this is I don't want to control the brand. I want to make it coherent.
Yeah.
And there's so many messages coming at people all the time. And if we hit them with too many things, as delightful as those many messages may be, they get really confused. And then we have broken the franchise. So really it's about sort of, helping people understand that there is a certain coherence that's needed to be understandable in the world. And that's really what we're trying to do. And then give them a lot of tools so they can make good choices.
It's a great way to think
Just
about
like with
it.
children, right?
Yes.
I'll tell you, one of the things that we've done that has been really helpful, and this is a new for us, because for a while we didn't have that many people creating content, and then it just grew, and it's everything from stories out on the web in video to product content on pages to the whole gamut. And so we have brand style guidelines and all of that good stuff that is sort of in that hard, soft, no rule space. But what we have started doing, because we always did end of the month design reviews, where people just brought stuff from us and from outside that they loved. And we've started doing that with content as well. But we did it with a little bit of a twist, which is basically like, it has to be stuff that your team produced, so it's not about pointing it. You can bring things from other teams that you loved, but we ask people to bring things from their own team, where they're like, I feel like this missed the mark.
Yep.
And we talk about it together, and we're not a global organization, so that's an easy thing to do, but it's actually like a great discussion just about like, where does this feel in terms of where the brand is now? And so it's not a police thing, because no one wants that job and no one wants to listen to those people, but people actually want to be in a dialogue with other smart, creative people, sharing stuff they love, and also sharing things they're like, oh, what could I have done better here?
Yeah.
And it's been really useful.
Yeah.
Excellent. Final question before we get to the speed round, before we get to Q&A. And that question is, what is on your radar with respect to sort of emerging tools, techniques? What's hot and interesting? Is it voice-based interfaces? Are you thinking AR, VR? Like, what are you watching that you think marketers will be able to adopt and get some mainstream value out of in the next, let's say, 18 months? Who wants to go first?
You want technologies?
Technology, or even, it could be technology or techniques.
Well, VR is very much in the mind of many of the organizations that we're working with, very much. And there's this curve for any emerging technology, and VR is on this curve. I don't know whether it's on the sort of like the uptick, or if it's in that kind of trough of we don't know what yet. Yeah, the disillusionment, exactly right. But one of the things that we're starting to understand, working with organizations like Planned Parenthood, for example, is how could this be used as an empathy tool, but not in a coercive way? So what is the opportunity to actually not get people to come over to a certain point of view, but to enter a space where they can at least say, I don't know, and I'm open to learning more. So this is a super interesting moment, just not in terms of marketing, but I'd say more in terms of communications and hosting dialogue and doing that through experiences. And I think that coming generations are going to be much more open to actually learning that way anyway. So that's going to be how they're going to expect to receive a lot of their messages, with a lot of raw content that allows them to come to their own points of view, as opposed to being told what to think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I would have said VR also, although 18 months is maybe a little close. I think I mentioned when we were talking
36.
before, which is, for a while, it's every year was the year of mobile, until it finally was, a decade
So
into
last
it.
year at that point.
Right, exactly. That's so true. And it feels like we're kind of in that place with VR, but I do think for the generation that is coming of age, for whom the internet and PCs are like refrigerators, right? It's just another appliance. They don't even think of that as technology. VR is going to play a really important part in how they experience the world. And so I think, while it may not be a marketing channel per se, you cannot ignore it as a marketer. I do also think that just in terms of marketing channels, I do think we're in this just huge golden age of all things audio. And that is everything from the importance of sonic cues across lots of different kinds of experiences.
And where did that come from, by the way? why do we went backwards. We took away another dimension of like hearing and learning, and we went into sort of one uniform dimension of like listening. I don't understand why that happened.
I think this is, Liza Landsman, rogue employee point of view. I don't know. This is not a Walmart point of view. Wow, that's a weird thing for me to say out loud. I think people have sensory overload from the amount of video they're consuming, and there's something incredibly intimate about audio as a way to absorb information or connect or feel like you're connecting with other humans, because they're literally inside your head.
Yeah. It's interesting though, isn't it? Because Siri doesn't have a face, right? And that's actually one thing that I'm pushing our web team is in terms of just really thinking through how you actually use voice and voice activation and voice commands in terms of that engagement with just being online.
Yeah.
So it's, and they're looking at me going, like, I don't think that technology exists today yet, right? It exists in the phone, but through the device itself versus, in every interface, every engagement that you have digitally, with your website, how can I do that using voice instead of typing commands or things like that too? But that's, I don't know how far that is off too. It's probably more than 18 months as well, Jake.
Yes, likely. Well, I think at this point, let's take some questions from the audience. We have a question right here.
So with all of the
There's a microphone coming your way.
great panel. With all of the transformation you guys are tackling and the broader purview of marketing, I'm curious the things that you're doing to invest in your people and keeping their skill sets, getting them modern skill sets, keeping their skill sets modern, giving them that broader context and perspective so they can do the things you're talking about doing.
It's a great question. And I would say for us, we've had a really challenging year because we actually have transitioned a lot of our teams in terms of, because we completely changed our operating model. What we actually did was we actually invested in a marketing university. And so we actually built out a whole curriculum. So every single one of our marketing and comms employees is digitally and socially certified. So they actually have to go through a certification process. We're doing a lot of work with educational institutions like Kellogg in terms of really trying to not just only attract the talent that come out of that university, but as a way to keep the skills really fresh and relevant, in the marketplace. So it's a combination of actually bringing in new talent that we find that are quite frankly digitally native, so they just having to think and train about it, but also the rest of our employee base as to what do they need to know and learn for the future as well. So it's a combination.
Next question. Back here somewhere in the blinding light.
Yeah, it is true.
That's okay.
That's okay.
That's good.
I have a question for you as active CMOs. Two questions. One, do you have revenue responsibility today? Will you in 24 months?
Excellent question.
I
do.
No, I don't. I feel like I'm responsible for all of the revenue in some way, but no, I won't in 24 months.
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
And I expect that will not change. I hope I don't also have responsibility for margin in 24 months, because that is a harder problem to solve.
That really sucks. And I do. We're responsible for generating a certain amount of marketing pipeline, which we're then also responsible for converting into actually business. So we'll actually carry, I think it's about $1 billion in net new revenue for Cisco next year.
Next question. Yes.
Hi, you mentioned some of the things that you're excited about. Would you be willing to share some of the things that you're anxious about moving into 2017, some of the things that keep you up at night?
The end of the Republic.
Hey, I'm really screwed. I'm British and American. I got Brexit and I got the US. I've got nowhere to go. I can't even go home.
building on that,
Yes. Sorry. A real answer. I'm sorry. That is a real answer, by the way.
It is actually, yes, it is.
I'm worried we're headed into a retraction of some kind, and I don't know the nature of this one. I've been through a couple in my career, and every time we come out of those, we react differently in the one that comes after that. I don't know what this one is. I mean, it's just it's a malaise, it's a anxiousness, and what we see in our business is that people don't stop investing. They learn that it's wrong to stop investing in innovation and whatever you want to, how you want to come out the other side. They learned that a long time ago. This kind of not knowing what kind of world we're going into, you don't know what you're investing for. And so that creates, in our world at least, sort of stringing out decisions, making micro decisions rather than macro decisions, and behaviors that, really kind of undermine great innovation. So.
Yeah, I mean, I all kidding aside, and that is not actually a subject that I think is funny, really. I do think there's a real impact to the consumer. I do think, I mean, we were looking, this is just during the election, looking year over year, and we're in a high growth business, and so we're continuing to see high growth, but when we look at trends on just like when holidays started last year versus this year, when you start seeing those earlier conversions, how many times people come back to visit items like under a certain price point before they make the purchase decision, you see a difference in behavior, and I think that just stems from that uncertainty. And so I think that's a real thing, at least in terms of the consumer perception and the confidence level.
And on our side too, we're quite concerned about what will the change in policy, net neutrality, some regulation that could completely change our whole industry. We just don't know what that is.
Next question.
Happy question.
More cheerful
Happy
one.
question.
But the Cubs won. So 2016 had one thing going for it.
Back here.
Sorry.
So I wanted to ask about the phrase customer experience, which gets used a lot in marketing to marketers, to folks like you. I've been in the tech industry long enough that I've seen a lot of phrases come and go, and sometimes they're just sort of the phrase of the moment that people talk about, and sometimes they really indicate a lasting change. I'd like to know about your attitude toward customer experience. Is it a lasting change in the way marketing works, or is it just the latest catchphrase that we're hearing from the analysts?
Lasting change, not going anywhere.
Yeah, I agree.
Catchphrase.
Catchphrase. No, but I think it is because, honestly, something we talked about earlier, which is that so much of the customer experience today in almost any business, or much of it, is digital, and so as a result, and consumers have access to, and businesses, near perfect real-time information about your brand, your behaviors, and your product. That if you're a marketer who doesn't pay attention to the customer experience, you're either going to have to be really lucky or have a very forgiving boss and board. Because you can't spend money smartly if it is totally disconnected to the customer experience.
And I'd also add that I think customer experience, has this notion, or at least it had, that it's this experience that you create for someone and then you offer them that experience and they consume that experience, and that you want to make it better and better and better. But in fact, the experiences of tomorrow are going to be co-created. And so that creates this I don't even know what happens to the brand when you're starting to make experiences together. And you're getting into this now, I think, with the gamification that you're overlaying on top of the buying experience, where you kind of don't know what's going to come out the other side of that experience. And how you hold that as a brand manager is going to be really interesting.
I think it's a harder one for B2B companies, frankly. I think it's an easier one for marketers to get their heads around if they're consumer marketing. I think my challenge is helping our organization understand that experience, whether it's human or digital or the combination of the two, and how they integrate and come together, is going to be the biggest decider of brand preference over product and price. And so I think it's a bigger leap for a B2B company to really drive. But I absolutely passionately believe it's still very, very much applicable.
Yes, and I agree. Next question.
Can I ask 2 questions?
Sure.
The first one is, how many of you actually have your call centers reporting to you? Is that part of marketing?
Yes.
You come to the website,
Yeah.
the chat session, so that's the first part of the question. The second one is, who do you see out there that you think has really gotten it right?
Done call centers right? Or done customer experience right?
Overall journey, it's like you look at them and say they've already way ahead.
Customer experience, did you say the last part? Customer experience?
Who's nailing it?
I mean, I had this as an oldie but a goodie, but I think Ritz-Carlton is great. No, I mean, obviously you're paying for it.
It should be.
But there are plenty of places that you pay for where the customer experience is not great.
That's true.
And the thing that I find so, sort of satisfying about it is that if you talk to someone on the phone, there is this consistency of voice and brand and experience. And the people you talk to on the phone are helpful and friendly and represent the brand and are empowered. And if you're in a hotel, the people you talk to are helpful and friendly and empowered. And when you see material from the Ritz-Carlton, and the actual experience of staying there is great, right? That's sort of going back to that last customer experience question. It's not just about the digital portion of it. When I think about it for us, one of the single biggest indicators of whether we get good, great, or terrible NPS scores from consumers is whether they get their packages from us on time. So they can have a fantastic experience, get a great price for amazing products on the site, but if the package doesn't come in the time we said it was going to come, they're deeply disappointed, and they're right. And so that's why I say Ritz-Carlton, because it's really every single piece of the experience feels like that brand and is positive.
Yeah.
Every transaction is another opportunity to fail, really. In
Every,
some ways.
every moment,
Yeah.
every moment that matters.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, although recovery from bad experiences is often
Yeah.
like a bigger loyalty builder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other examples?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we were getting.
Okay.
I would say Apple. Actually, it's an oft-used example, but if you think about the product, do they have the best product quality? Do they have the best price? Do they have are they able to command that premium because they have a great experience? Yeah.
Next question.
No, you're getting waved off.
One more, sorry. I was already committed. Karen's going to kill me.
So as a marketing leader in the Bay Area over the last 2 years, one of my biggest challenges have been recruiting and hiring. I'm wondering if that's been a problem for you guys, and what's the trick, if there's a trick?
What's the trick? My goodness. You have to have, in my experience, this is the #1 issue in a professional services firm. And for our clients who want to hire people who are who think like designers and are nimble and can work in these sort of new ways, they don't have enough people to bring on board. And so they're stealing them left and right from the people who do. Us. And so it's really tough. And so we compete based on culture and on quality of work, and that can only get you, or quality of lifestyle at work, and that can only get you so far. After a while, it just becomes this war, and you see people going out the door for 2 and 3 times what they're making. It's just shocking. But I think really, if you don't have something that people want to feel like they're part of, you're a non-starter in this environment. You're just not going to be able to get anybody who's worth keeping around.
Yeah, I mean, trick 1 is complete shamelessness. That is, like, I will talk to anyone. People on our team will talk to any referrals. We hit up everyone we know all the time, relentlessly, in the pursuit of great talent. I think part of it is actually, even when you're desperate, keeping the bar really high.
Yes.
Because there is nothing that will make great talent flee faster than being forced to sit next to mediocrity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That is just a total, it's not just that that person is not producing great work, it's that I really feel like they are just an energy suck.
They drag everyone.
They drag everyone down.
Yeah.
And so, we've all had moments where like, oh my God, I just need like another human being. And so I understand the temptation, but fight it. And I do agree also, you all have to feel like you're on a mission together, and you have to laugh a lot at work.
Yeah, we've really doubled down on that too, because again, we've made massive changes in our team. We really focused on kind of our culture and kind of what makes us attractive to the best talent out there. And it's everything from the workplace culture, flexibility. They're able to volunteer like 40 hours to go off and do something that's really good for humankind. We have a great early in career program where we're attracting and recruiting a lot of talent straight from university. One thing that we're struggling with, I'll be honest with you, is that the talent, especially here in the Bay Area, I think that's what the question was, they want to live in the city. I would want to live in the city. But so we've got to really think about our site strategy and how do we allow that flexibility, because also we were talking about this earlier, commuting on a bus for 3 hours, 4 hours a day is not what they want to do either. So we're trying to figure out how do we put locations and allow them to live and work in somewhere that's really cool, that they really are energized by. And then also for us, because when we talk to folks about how we're transforming marketing in Cisco, they'll go, really? You what? And so they actually feel that they're actually part of something bigger and they're going to make a difference.
How about a round of applause for our panelists?
I'd like to thank our speakers so much, and Jake for sharing your perspective so freely with us. We really appreciate it. As a small token of our appreciation for you, we do have the Churchill Club speaker t-shirt.
Yay!
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please wear that in very good health. A recording of this program will be available on the Churchill Club YouTube channel soon, where you'll find recordings of most of our other programs as well. We hope that you will find that to be a very useful resource. Next up, we have on November 30th a program about the future of batteries. After that, it's a dive into deep learning on December 2nd. That closes out the year. Hope you can join us. And you have been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you.